So pull the trans out, pull the engine block out, and I have stripped it to its bare core, and that is so we can clean it and prepare it to do all those little upgrades that you need to do to engines that are this kind of kilometers. Because realistically, if you're buying an engine from a wreckers and you think you're just going to put it in and have a good time, well, you might actually be really disappointed. And I'm going to tell you why. We're going to run through this now in depth, and I'm going to show you some of the things that I've found that unless you actually strip your engine down, have a good look at it, you might not understand, and you might wonder why it's not quite performing the way you hoped it would. So, engine block, bunch of parts, bunch of more parts. So, essentially, when I first got this block, the first thing I did was turn it upside down, put it on the engine stand. First turn it upside down, and then I took off a couple of main caps and I took apart a couple of big ends just to check the rod bearings. And what I found was expected for a high kilometer engine of any kind, let alone a Barra, and that was really heavy wear on the bearings. Now, you might luck out and get engines that are, look killer. Especially the gas engines, they really keep the bearings looking pretty good because there's not a lot of contaminants in the oil because the gas burns really clean. However, it doesn't matter how clean an engine burns if the person that owns that car, where the engine come from, never does any maintenance at all. And the color of the oil from this engine did not resemble that of what normal gas engines normally do. And the bearings really tell the story. So first of all, let's start from the bottom end. Here is the engine block. I've cleaned it up here a little bit. To clean this, all I did, I've used gasket scraper, some gasket dissolver stuff from CRC to really bite into some of that carbon, and then a roll-lock disc on a drill. And then final finishing we done just with a stone. And yeah, this is coming up really well so far. This is obviously, what are they, cast iron or whatever, and that. So they're really hard. It's hard to, you're not going to damage it too much with one of those roll-lock discs and just a little stone. But just always be careful if you're going to do this at home. The cams look okay. There's a little bit of surface rust there from that's where the breathers were and stuff like that, so they look all right. The rest of the stuff in there is being reused. It's just got to be cleaned. Crankshaft are there, and that looks all right too. So the bores look good. However, what I've noticed is that the bores are, I wouldn't say glazed. Basically, that means that bores are really polished, and they don't have any cross hatching in them. So the issue with that obviously is that it's just not really good with the oil being washed up and down the bores, and it probably goes to show why the exhaust ports of this thing look pretty oily. So I would say that this engine probably had a lot of blow-by and a lot of oil going out the exhaust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the old dingleberry and I'm going to hone that with the drill and just get some cross hatching back in there, and then throw the standard rods and pistons and rings back in there, because yeah, it's a pretty low budget engine. I only want to make sort of really low sort of horsepower with it, so I'm not going to bother with machine shop sort of stuff. Also, it's early December now, and if I tried to get a machine shop to do anything, even in the best of times, machine shops are pretty notorious in the performance automotive game for taking their absolute sweet ass time to do anything. And at this time of year, good luck. I could probably drop something off early December and get it back sometime in March. So no thanks. I'll give the old dingleberry hone and that and give it a what 5 and send it. Other than that, everything else looks good and true. I've cleaned up the block. It's cleaned up really well. I'll paint that, and then that'll be tick for the block. So let's move on to this table here, which holds some other secrets. So we've got our rods, and they all look really good. The rings look really good. Carbon on top of the pistons and stuff, but all the rods are really straight. You can see there's normal like wear marks on the side of them. That's fine. There's no wear in the bores. They all look really good. Now here are the bearings, the rod bearings. And as you can see, I'm sorry, but you know, if you're all about, yeah, slap it in and send it, man, these bearings are cooked, okay? So they're not going back in. Everything here is sort of the performance side of stuff we want, and so I got all this from Dominator Motorsports because it's just easier to get everything you need from one place. So we've got big ends and mains there, genuine ACL ones. They also supply those. I've got obviously the valve springs, the oil pump with the backing plate already assembled and clearanced and everything. Timing chain and the guides. Now, the guides, I don't know, they're in here. This is stuff with the bins, but basically this bit was broken off and I had severe wear on here on mine. So that's why you run these updated ones. Got a good updated tensioner and stuff there, new bolts. Heavy duty timing chain as well. And then I've got head studs and then I've got a gasket set. Now, what's missing from this? Well, not much. So this is what I would, you know, what you call the pretty basic 2K barra, as you would see on full boost upgrade kit. You put in, you know, you might re-gasket it, you put in head studs, you put in valve springs, and you change your oil pump gears as a minimum, and that should get you out of trouble to being some pretty decent horsepower and pretty happy motoring. However, the things that a lot of people don't do, of what I've just overrun there, is, you know, your bearings can be absolutely shot depending on the kilometers the engine's done and how well it's been serviced in its life. And if your block has absolutely no cross hatching left in it, in the bores, it is just going to blow oil out everywhere, and it's not going to seal great either. Now, the second thing that is key to sealing in terms of making power is the cylinder head. So let's have a bit of a look here at what we've got in store for the head. So here's the head. I took out all the lifters, the followers, and this is the front of engine. So these are all in order, so they can go back in because they'll be running on the same cam. So you sort of want that same wear profile or whatever, and that to be on the same cam. But they all look really good. We've got the lifter, the cam blocks or whatever to hold it down. Here's the big end caps from the rods. These are new rod bolts, so obviously rod bolts are torque to yield, so really shouldn't be reusing the rod bolts again. These are really cheap, it's got new rod bolts. But if we move over to the cylinder head, pretty notorious, these Barra heads, for burning out exhaust valves. So what I did is I had the head upside down and I filled all the chamber pockets with a fluid. And some people commented it was piss. It wasn't. It was actually this stuff, universal coolant from Penrite. I just put that in all the chambers, and I'll show you what I did. Quick backyard way to see if the valves are leaking. Fill these chambers up with fluid, and nothing, 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 nothing. Uh-oh. At an update about half an hour later, you can see number 6 is okay, 5 is leaking, 4 is leaking, 3 is leaking a little bit, 2 is leaking, and 1 is leaking. Barra exhaust valves. So I had the cylinder head like this, and essentially all I did was fill up all of these to the brim, and then I monitored the exhausts and intakes, and what I found was that almost on every single one of these, it was leaking from the exhaust. I think number 6 was the only one that was leaking, and number 3 maybe was also not leaking that much either. But they're not burnt. You can see, normally you see burnt, you might see like a little bit missing on a corner or whatever. They're not burnt, but they've obviously got a lot of carbon, a lot of build-up, so they're not sealing. So this is a really easy test just to fill the chamber. Obviously, there's no cam, so that there's in the head, so there's nothing to push the valves down. So these valves should be completely sealed and not letting any air through. Now, if they're leaking out the exhaust, that means on the the compression stroke, instead of that pressure building up to then ignite and force the piston back down to make horsepower, it's going to be leaking that out, some of that out the exhaust. So that's no good. So what I'll be doing is backyard valve job, which is basically just take the valve springs off, take the valve out, clean the back of the valve a bit, and then put a bit of grinding paste in there, attach your little suction thing there, and back and forward like you're trying to start a fire in the bush, old bush style, trying to start your little fire with a couple of sticks or whatever, and you just, all that does is lap in a new pattern for the valve against the seat, and hopefully what that'll do is it will it'll be able to enable the head to seal properly. Now, the non-backyard way of doing this would be to obviously take it to a cylinder head reco place and have them probably knock the seats out and cut new seats into it, and then probably put new valves into it and lap those in. But again, it's early December. If I drop this head off at a head place, probably not getting back to February. So I want to do all this because the last piece of the puzzle for that thing up there, to get it to actually move under its own power, was a tail shaft, and GJ Drivelines have said that the tail shaft is ready. So GJ Drivelines make a special tail shaft for these things, which goes from the back of the ZF box to leaf spring. So it's got a slip yoke in the middle of it, which means it'll, obviously like in a factory Ford, there's no slip yoke in the back of the gearbox, and it's IRS, so it's all one piece, which is fine. However, in this car, the suspension, articulates, which means you need some kind of slip. So they build a tail shaft with that slip in it. So I'll be picking that up, and that means if I do the backyard valve job myself and everything works, early January, I can drive the car. Right, so I know what a lot of people are saying in that, you've gone to expense of got the head off, you got the engine apart, and you're doing all this. Why don't you put a set of pistons in it and a set of rods in it? And, what about main studs and things like that? And this is where I guess you need to show some form of self-control and stick to A, a budget, and B, a timeline, and see what your goals are. So my goal with this car is to A, get it on the road as soon as possible. I want to drive it. Having a project on your hoist or on your axle stands at home in the garage and talking about it and talking it up to people about how good it's going to be when it's done, that's all good and well, but getting it done is more important than talking about getting it done. So I want this thing on the road as soon as possible. As soon as you want to put things like main studs in an engine, that means it has to go to the machine shop. It needs to be, the tunnel needs to be bored, needs to be line bored, make sure it's all true, because the clamping load's going to be different, so the main cap's going to squash differently. So, there's way more expensive machining. If you're going to put, new pistons in it, means brand new rings, moly rings, means the bores need to be finished to a different level, and just throwing in, a bit of a dingleberry hone for the cast rings and that. So again, more machining work, more cost, longer downtime. It's downtime then that I don't have all this room in the garage just to leave all these parts spread out here waiting for, 3 months for a machine shop to machine the block, because machine shops aren't just sitting around waiting for people to just rock up and go, could you do this today? They've got lots of work already planned that they're trying to get through. So it takes a long time, and they often take a long time, which is why I own a lathe and a mill, so I can do work with rotary engines myself. But this kind of work I can't do. I don't have a big, boring machine and stuff to do tunnel boring and stuff like that. So, they're big dollar expensive machines. That's why you need the professionals to do that stuff. But I'm going to stick to this budget. I'm going to stick to this power goal. And I'm going to get this car on the road. That is what's super important. It's what a lot of people lose sight of when they're doing a project is, what's the end goal? The end goal should always be to get it on the road, if that's what it is. And if that means, not changing direction 8 times, there's people that'll, before the car's even on the road, they've already upgraded their turbo 3 times, changed ECU twice, and, done all this kind of stuff. Sometimes you've just got to say, I'm happy with what I've got, and I'm going to get it on the road and enjoy it. Everyone wants 1,000 horsepower, but so many of these people have never even experienced 400 horsepower, especially in a light car. And trust me, in a light car, 400 horsepower at the rear wheels is a fun time. I know the internet might not say that, it might not say that way, but it certainly is. So that's why I'm only doing a lot of the top end stuff. The only bottom end stuff I'm really doing is bearings, because they're shot, let's face it. And then, hopefully everything comes out all right. So I think from here on, I've got some stuff arriving next week, which we'll go over. We'll go over the old Dingleberry. We'll see how that goes. And then, yeah, I think I need a new water pump. I'll show you the old water pump. That's seen, you can even hear that. That's seen better days. That's shot, that's done. So I've got a water pump coming. I've got a steel pulley coming from the water pump, which I think was more almost than the actual new water pump. And then, yeah, I've got to pick up the tail shaft from GJ Drivelines. I know for a fact that this thing turns over off the key, the Heltec lights up, all the ECU stuff works, so there's no reason that once fuel runs through the system that it won't actually start the key. So that's pretty much everything we've got going on here. But yeah, in terms of budget Barra power-ups, you know, this is really what you should be looking to doing. Stick to your budget, get the thing on the road, and do what you should be doing. Don't do just because the internet says buy an import, you know, wrecker engine and just slam it in your car and have a, you know, everything's all right. My mate made 500 horsepower on his 8 million kilometer taxi engine. That's great. These engines are getting even longer in the tooth now, which means they're probably going the even longer service intervals, which means they're even worse than they've ever been before. So just understand that if you're not going to put money into it, don't expect for longevity or a great return either, especially with exhaust valves and these gas engines. If you aren't going to check the cylinder head for leak down, you can do that while the engine's still apart. You can get a leak down tester really cheaply and test the leak down. If the leak down's really high, it means either the rings aren't sealing or the valves aren't sealing. So, or in my case, it would probably would have been both if I didn't actually touch this and just put it in the engine. So what that would have meant is I would have gone to the dyno or gone racing, and it would have seemed like it made great horsepower, but this is an air pump, and if the air pump's not efficient, you're not going to make horsepower anyway. So it doesn't matter how much boost you put in, the air pump has to be pretty good to start with. So I think that's about it. Let's run over the RX-7 quickly and where that's at as well. All right, so the RX-7 sitting here, as you can see, it has I don't know what's got a car cover over the back, to be honest. It's probably just so I can hold parts for the RX-4, because that's what happens when cars sit around in the garage. In a small garage, they become workbenches for everything else. You can see a whole heap of stuff on the roof there. So, yeah, it's, what is it, second week of December now. So realistically, chance of getting this thing on the dyno is probably 0 before January. And then even in early January, it's probably 0. So, you know, I need to find someone who's available at weird hours. So I can't just go between Monday and Friday 9 to 5 because I work and I'm not taking time off to go dyno my car. So yeah, the list of places that are actually available to do stuff is really small. So we used Jason before with the 626, so I'll probably hit Jason up and see what his availability is like. They've got a private day, I think, this weekend or something, so he'd be flat out for that stuff, so I won't annoy him this week. Maybe early next week I'll hit him up and we'll see, A, what his availability is like, but B, if he wants to do it, because rotaries are smoky, smelly, noisy and loud, and I don't think he likes any of those things. So if he says no, I'll be on the hunt again. So if you know of anyone with mainline hub dyno that works some weird hours, late Friday nights or Saturdays and Sundays and stuff, let me know. Otherwise, yeah, hopefully that thing coming to a dyno soon, and the weekend after that thing's on the dyno, it is going straight to the racetrack. Let me assure you that, and I will not be dying wondering of how it's going to go, because it will be sent on the first pass. I'll try and restrain myself and maybe only take it to like 330 foot, but anyone that watches drag racing guys and that, you see what Cletus and those guys get out to the track and they're only going to do like a 330 pass or a half track pass, and it sometimes gets pushed out a little bit beyond that. Sometimes the adrenaline takes over, so you just end up running out the back door. But yeah, with the new engine and everything in that, and some new setup stuff in there, which I'll reveal later, I will take it a bit easier, I think, on it. But that's pretty much it for now. I've still got a bit of welding to do in this, as you can see. There used to be some Mazda in there. Now there's not so much Mazda. So a bit of welding to be done in there. And then yeah, in the new year, I'd like to take it pretty much running to S&M Engineering and just get them to look over it. And then once they've looked over it, I can start painting it and doing the final welding and stuff, because you can't paint the car until the engineers inspected all your welds visually and stuff like that. So you can't hide stuff under paint. So we'll get all that sorted. Yeah, hopefully we will get back to this sometime before Christmas. I'd like this all off, and all this off the benches and off the floor before Christmas. The hone and all the other stuff is coming early next week, so should be pretty good to do that. And then yeah, and then we'll get back into it. So until then, if you need any Go Fast Barra bits, hit up Dominator Motorsports Australia, because you know it's really easy to buy from one place and one guy who knows everything there is to know about barras. And you know, it'll just move your project along really quickly rather than waiting for bits and pieces from 7 different parts. So that's us for now, and in the meantime, concentrate on getting your own projects on the road, and I'll see you out there.